All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Transportation Advisory Council at 3 o'clock. Roll call. Chesak.
Here.
Kep.
Here.
Lambert.
Here.
Nabel.
Here.
Stenberg.
Here.
Perfect. Bertram is here as well. Approval of agenda.
Mr. Chair, I so move. Second.
First and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on. Approval of minutes from 1/26/23.
Lambert, so move to accept?
Second.
Second, Stenberg. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Unfinished business. I think to make it simpler, I think we let Jesse take the first stab at summarizing the document that he sent out to the TAC, and we'll save questions until his initial summary is done, rather than trying to ask questions as he goes through it, and then we can jump back into things if we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, the memo is kind of a good summary of how we went through the analysis and how we kind of prepared everything. What we kind of expressed at the January meeting was,
Your mic
Could
on,
you
Jesse?
use your microphone, please?
it's on.
Okay.
Yep. What we kind of expressed at the January meeting is some of the challenges of analyzing one group versus the entire system. It forces us to run a lot of assumptions in that analysis. Now we're able to do that and take a lot of those assumptions and perform the analysis, but it does put us at a little bit of a disadvantage that any changes that we make may alter those assumptions, and then you have to rerun this analysis. So that's some of the disadvantage of doing one versus the entire group and looking at it individually from there. So with that, I did kind of lay out some of those assumptions and how we came up with those. One of those I do want to expand on a little bit. So the MnDOT participation, I did talk with our MnDOT group, and they kind of confirmed the assumptions that we are making in here is generally what they're expecting to see over the next couple years. The one issue we're going to continue to have is MnDOT's cap on year-over-year contributions in the grant funding. So right now that they are participating in 90% of our operating and capital costs. In future years, it would go to back to, I call the standard 85-15 split. But the issue we run into now is we are still exceeding the allotted amount of year-over-year increases in that grant amount. So because of that cap, we're really not actually getting funded the full 90% this year. And we likely will not get funded the full 85% in future years. I kind of expanded on here that it's going to be closer to 78 to 79% rather than the 85% that they're implying. But again, that's really because of the year-over-year cap of increase. I did speak with Tori about that, and if there was going to be an opportunity in future years to call a catch up a little bit to where we're at now and what our expenses are currently at, and try and get back to that 85. There is discussion on the MnDOT side if there's going to be funding available to do more of like a competitive solicitation for a handful of the different agencies and transit programs that would receive some additional operational funding. But it is just discussions right now, and no decisions have been made, and no framework of what that would look like has been determined at this time. But it is something that they're looking at, and that would actually, if we are able to go down that route, help kind of resolve some of the issues of short funding by MnDOT to get us caught up to more of that 85% that we'd like to see. The other part of this is, I know we mentioned Blue Sky and how we've been running one reduced service in Brainerd for a little while since we haven't had the ridership come back since COVID. At some point, we're going to continue to, if we're going to continue to increase ridership, there is going to be discussions about how many rides do we have to cancel before we want to bring that service back into place, which would inevitably change the amount that we get billed by Blue Sky back closer to the original contract amount rather than the reduced amount that we're currently seeing. The other part of that is their contract expires in mid 2024, so in June 2024. My concern is with the inflation that we've seen and the increase market-wise with labor costs, wage costs, I would be very surprised to see Blue Sky or anybody else's contract come in not at a considerable increase from what they've seen prior to COVID and the inflation that we've seen. Right now, we're just going to run under the assumption that it's going to continue to grow at the same pace that this contract has shown, which is generally about $50,000 per year increase year over year, but there is no guarantee that a future contract will be the same. So that was another big assumption that we had to make with this. And then the other part is contract splits between our cooperative partners. Currently, we have the splits that we do, and those are the splits that have been there for quite a few years. If you make any significant changes to the system, it's likely that you'd want to relook at those percentages to make sure that everybody's being treated about as fairly as possible. With that said, as soon as you do anything to those percentages, that really puts a wrench into the analysis that we're doing here. So you would want to relook at that as well. And then the last real assumption we did is the ridership. So I kind of showed a little bit of a graph in here and expressed that, we've seen ridership grow over the last few years, or at least since COVID, obviously. And we had a considerable dip during COVID and all the shutdowns. And as would be expected, we saw a significant increase in those first handful of months following the COVID lockdowns. Obviously, people started getting out of their homes, and ridership increased quite significantly in comparison to what it was during the lockdowns. And slowly, those increases have slowed down. They're continuing to still show increases month over month, year over year, but they are slowing. So the best way that I was able to project that out is just kind of that graph that you kind of see there in the dash in the graph, that we're continuing to show increase, but it's slowing down. But we are anticipating that we'll, through our different avenues with social media and marketing, to slowly continue to grow. If we see a trend that happened prior to COVID, where we did see some pretty significant losses in ridership, again, that would put quite a wrench into this analysis. So another assumption that we had to make is based off the last couple years of what that trend has been, and then using that to project ridership for the next handful of years. So with all that said, the best I was able to come up with is projecting out for the next 5 years our ridership, specifically for Brainerd, and breaking that out into roughly splits that we saw in 2022 when it comes to both our same-day riders, our riders that are booking their rides a day or two ahead of time, and then our productive alternatives and voice riders. Another assumption I made is that the productive alternatives groups, the ones that are paying that special fare, I'm not projecting them to increase. I'm projecting them to stay flat. So you'll see in the analysis that through the next 5 years, I kept them at 15,000, which is about where they're at today. I just don't anticipate to see the continued growth from that group. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's the assumption I ran with that. The dial-a-ride riders, those are where I projected the increase. So you'll see the regular and the same day continue to increase for the next 5 years. So those are the assumptions I used for there. Then from there, we broke out the expenditures based on that percentage split that we talked about. So Brainerd's currently split at 46% of the expenditures. So using that same 46%, I was able to come up with what our share would be, and then also split that out with what the MnDOT share would be of those expenditures. Now, because I know that for the next handful of years, MnDOT will not be funding us at the full 85% that they show in their contract. It's going, like I mentioned, closer to 78 to 79. I used that number as MnDOT's share. I thought that would be more appropriate. and maybe a better real look at what we would expect to see from their share. So with that, it comes up to what our local share of the expenditures would be. So you can kind of see there in the first year, we're talking a little over 150,000 that Brainerd itself has to raise through fare box revenue, invoice revenue, through our other avenues of revenue other than grant funding. And as years continue to progress, those expenditures obviously go up. So I used a pretty modest inflation rate from 23 to 27 of about 2% year over year when it comes to like personnel, supplies, services like maintenance, fuels. I used a 2% year over year increase for a modest inflation rate. And then again, I projected out a blue sky transit contract through the next handful of years using the same or at least similar type of increases from that group. So that's why you do see the local share over year continue to increase for the next handful of years. So with all that said, I started playing with some of the numbers, assuming that if we were to make changes in a relatively short period and put a 30-day notice out and make changes that would be, let's say, effective May 1st. I ran that scenario with the 2023 with kind of a split, with the first 4 months being under the existing fare system, and then the remaining May through December under what a proposed fare system could possibly be, and see what the difference would be and how much we would raise through fare box revenue. There are some small bits of revenue that are missing from here. They are small, and it was going to be really difficult to perform this analysis. So while you'll see some shortfalls here, we might be able to make up a couple $100 here and there. But I felt that best to just leave them out of this analysis because it could have really skewed some of the results. So I focused on really what the big hitters were. Like I said, our dial-a-ride, our productive alternatives, and our voice riders. Those are the majority of our revenue and our expenditures. So I focused most of the analysis on there. So with that said, I did put in there a rough number of $3 for our regular riders that book in advance, same-day riders at double the rate, which is kind of our practice now, which would be $6, and then moving our productive alternatives and voice riders up to $6. They're currently at $3, if I remember right. So that would be a considerable increase from that group. The other issue we would have with the productive alternatives and voice is we would have to look at tour agreement and what flexibility we would have to adjust their rates prior to the end of an agreement. So there is a possibility that we do not have the flexibility to adjust their rates within the calendar year until the end of their contract or their agreement. So I can't guarantee you that we'd be able to make that adjustment. And the big problem with them is they do cover a considerable amount of our expenditures and our revenues. I think what I found was roughly about 40% of Brainerd's fares do come from productive alternatives and voice. So it's a considerable amount. So if we're not able to adjust their rates mid-agreement, that's going to be a considerable hit. And I know we've talked about the potential if any of those groups were to either take a lot of their riders away or stop riding our service altogether, that would be a considerable hurt for the Brainerd side of this side of the equation. So we really need to make sure that we're being very cautious with how we address this and make sure we do everything pretty responsibly, especially with that group that holds such a large amount of our ridership throughout the year. As I projected this out, I was able to utilize the same amount of fares, that $3 and $6 fare structure, through the next handful of years. It does fluctuate a little bit from negatives to positives when it comes to surplus deficit, but generally it floats right around that $0 amount. And like I said, it's all projections, and you're going to see some gains and some losses, and we do have a few other sources of revenue that we do have that aren't included in here that can help close some of the smaller gaps here. But you generally have the next 5 years of projections based on those assumptions. And the other part I wanted to mention here is something that Crystal and I have been notified is that we have been selected to have some services from MnDOT hired consultant. It was AECOM, if I remember right. So there's a couple companies. One of them is AECOM that will assist by doing a very similar analysis, probably a lot more sophisticated than I did on Excel and reporting, but they're going to be able to look at our system a little bit more holistically through our routing, our rides, our system, the way it functions, our fare structure, all of those agreements, and do a much more thorough analysis than I was able to do, and probably a lot more experienced in doing those analysis. However, the issue is timing. They're just getting started in this process, and we'll likely have a kickoff meeting within the next month or so, but that potentially won't be known to us, at least the final results, until potentially the end of the year, which really puts us at a bit of a hamstring if we want to take more sooner actionable items when it comes to fares, especially throughout the co-op. We really can't afford to wait on that report. However, that will be a nice benefit for us to really take a look at and make sure that maybe some of the issues that we're talking about here and maybe some of the fare adjustments we talk about, that analysis by the consultant can help kind of confirm, or they can make adjustments based on that too.
Go ahead, Chadwick.
Could I just, maybe you could quickly nail down how this consultant we were selected, you said? And did we have any input on that selection? Was that something we looked for or applied for?
No, we applied through MnDOT. So MnDOT said, we're going to hire a consultant to do these kinds of analysis, and we want to know who's interested in having that service. So you did have to apply for it, and that was something that obviously in our current condition, we wanted to make sure that we had somebody that could do that for us. So we were lucky enough to be selected as one of the groups to get that service. Again, the problem is timing.
Jesse, can you just refresh my memory, or maybe Crystal, what is our current fund balance? I don't remember from last meeting.
I'll pull it up here quick.
I don't remember it all, that's the problem. I've looked at too many numbers in the last month.
Mr. Chair, I'd like
Go
to
ahead, Kev.
ask, would there be any appreciable difference in any of the figures we're looking at if revenues and expenditures from Baxter, Crow Wing County, and Pine River were added in? Would it give us a better picture or not?
It absolutely would. So my sneaking suspicion is certain groups are, I want to call it carrying or subsidizing other groups that are not doing as well. The reason I mentioned Pine River as many times as I did last meeting is I'm very skeptical that they are funding the expenditures that are going their way. As part of this analysis, I was just curious, and I roughly did some calculations off the top of my head, and they're potentially responsible for $80,000 to $90,000 of expenditures, and then you take the MnDOT share of that away, and they're really needing to fund $10,000 to $15,000, or potentially like around $10,000 to $15,000 locally, and their fares are roughly about $1 or $2 if they're going outside the city limits, and we're mostly only getting 1 to 2 riders a day. That bus is going a long way to get to Pine River, so there's a lot of expenditures between fuel, wear and tear on the bus, and then we have to pay for that driver to go all that way.
Well, since we're the contract holder, it always seems to me it'd be good to have the entire picture to look at. But we don't have that today, I guess. I think the main issue before us today has to do with raising the rate of the rider of the bus ticket.
That's entirely up to what the TAC would like to do if they want to explore doing a higher rate specifically for Brainerd. The one thing to consider too is if we were to let's take this example in here of the 3 and 6, that would put us considerably higher than the Baxter rate. And put us almost in line with the Crow Wing. So something to look at is, the riders at Brainerd are going to look at that and say, why are we so high, and they haven't made that adjustment. that is something that we've had to think about internally of what the optics of that do look like. But on the other side of that, to your point, Mary, I don't know if there's a lot of options that we do have to be able to wait.
Hold on one second, Jeff. Did we find that fund balance quick?
I did. So it was 203,670, and I believe that was right before the end of the year. So when we were talked about, I think it was roughly about $140,000 deficit. We ate into that quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
What's the answer then? for the fund balance?
It's going to be somewhere around 60,000,
60,000
roughly
-ish,
60,000.
Roughly. All right, Jeff, go ahead on your question.
You brought up Pine River, and I remember at the last meeting, I was certain that Pine River paid for their service. And now what I'm hearing from you is you're not sure how that's being handled? Could you clarify? Pine River
Again-
wanted a bus. They said they paid for it, the cost of having a bus. If their fares didn't cover the cost, the city council apparently said they would levy their taxpayers or somehow come with the money to pay the contract, or the contract holder to cover their costs. So what do we know for sure on that?
So I haven't had any conversations with Pine River, nor have I been able to really do a thorough analysis. Again, that as I was doing Brainerd, I thought in my mind I was just curious about Pine River, and I thought that would be a very easy one to do off the top of my mind. With that 1 to 2 riders, like I mentioned a day, you're talking about $1,000 to $1,500 of revenue. When off the top of the envelope, they're responsible for 10 to 15,000. So I know that there's some short there. There's probably short elsewhere too. I mean, you can make the argument there's probably some of the longer runs on Crow Wing if that covers those.
Mr. Chair, we should not be, neither should the county, nor should Baxter be paying anything on this service if we're subsidizing Pine River. So that's what we gotta clarify. And however that's done, I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. If Pine River's not even in Crow Wing County, so if they want a bus, they have to pay for it. That was the whole premise of bringing them into this. So I don't know what the agreements are on what needs to be done. And as long as I have the floor, if you don't mind, this fare increase, I'm not objecting to the $3. Is that just the number you thought, or was this used to show the financial increases if we went with $3? I mean, what would throw a really monkey wrench into this operation, if we're charging $3 and Baxter charges 2 1/4, that's gonna look rather difficult. It's gonna be kind of difficult, but at the same time, if we were gonna increase our rates, I'd be more in line with increasing it to what Baxter is charging, just for the sake of keeping it simple for the customers. Again, I'll just leave it at that.
I'll jump in a little bit and just to reiterate, we called this meeting specifically to look at Brainerd's financial projections, and I think us trying to assume what the rest of the system plays into this is gonna be a little hard for us to do and out of reach today. I do agree with your sentiment, Jeff, though, that, the other areas should pull their own weight, but we're not at a point where we can evaluate that today, so I think we're kind of stuck looking at Brainerd, and if there's anything specific we want to do here today with those fares. Jesse, if you have anything to add off of what Jeff said, you certainly can jump in.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So Jeff did bring up something that concerned me greatly as I went through this process, and knowing that we're only analyzing the one partner here and not analyzing the group is, especially with one of the assumptions, the percentages. If you remove service or you remove potentially Pine River, that can put a complete change into this whole calculation. And if you do this analysis and it turns out that we're actually in better shape when we drop some of the routes that are not holding their weight, and it does make us look better, does that mean that the $3 is really the right number anymore? Could we have gotten by with $2.50, and then do you talk about reducing the rate at that point? So again, that was kind of some of my worry of doing this analysis without having the whole group together with it and looking at holistically. But we were able to run it through with these assumptions, and I'm able to put together a number that, based on just Brainerd's numbers, that seem to work, but I would caution that there's a lot of assumptions built into it, and it's a lot more appropriate if we do include the other ones into that. And then once we've made some decisions on potential changes to the service, then we can rerun that analysis and see if what we're making assumptions are valid if we make those changes.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Jesse, how long will it take to put together a complete analysis for the complete system? So we know where we sit on wanting to increase all the segments of the system.
I would say it would take another couple months this is a busy time for us in engineering too, and Parks is going to wrap up soon. So I do personally have an awful lot of stuff that's going on right now, but I think I can accomplish getting through that analysis in the next couple months, kind of around the same time as our regular TAC was going to be originally scheduled for. I should be able to put together a whole summary of all of the different partners in the group. Crowing will be a little bit of a challenge because we have a lot of different types of services there. Baxter will be a lot more similar to Brainerd. Pine River is relatively simple. Crowing's tougher because you have the run that goes to Crosby. You have the St. Francis run, the Breezy run. So we have those different types of runs, and some of those have multiple riders on them coming at once. So that will make it a little bit more challenging as you do this in analysis, is how do you factor all that into it. But I think I do believe that we should be able to, in the next couple months, perform that analysis system-wide.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jim.
thank you. Pardon me. I was the one that was really pushing for this meeting. I think, in my mind, I think it's important that we do something now with our rate. I don't necessarily think we can do $3. And I agree that, maybe bring it up to Baxter. But in the past, what we've done on our increases is that we did an increase, and then we did another increase about 3 months later. Remember, the one year we did a double increase. But I think it's something that we need to look at now, and I would love if we had time to have that full analysis, but we need to look at what we have now. And I'd like to see us bring some extra revenue to our transit system now, and then have the full analysis in a couple of months, and then we can evaluate from there. I know it's piecemeal, but we can't afford to have going in the hole all the time.
Mr. Chair, we can't keep kicking the can down the road either. I'm going to move that we increase the rate to $2.75, and that it would go into effect by, I'll say, the April 15th. And that, of course, is for Brainerd because that's the only one we can control. We can always look at another one later.
I'll second that.
Can I ask one clarification, Mary, before I open it up for discussion? 275, he's projecting doubling then for same day? So we'd be at,
550.
Thank you, math people.
We double it.
So, Mr. Chair, is that 275 locally in Brainerd?
That's all we can control.
That's just
Brainerd.
Brainerd.
Baxter and Crowing and Pine River do their own.
But isn't there a different fare from Baxter to, say, Walmart?
From Brainerd to
From
Walmart
Brainerd-
is
from
Baxter
Brainerd to
fares, yeah.
So you're just talking 275 within Brainerd city
That's
limits?
right. Exactly.
I think that's a little steep.
I think discussion from my point, I don't know that I don't want to go that high personally. I think I would be more at like a $2 and $4 for now until we get the full analysis, but that's just me as one person, and I think everyone gets to weigh in and we'll vote.
It's currently one and a quarter, right?
It's 1 1/4 and $2.50 for same day. Go ahead.
Just a quick hypothetical. I know Pine River's farther than Little Falls. Have you thought about going into Little Falls and asking them if they would take a bus down there? I know it's Florissant County.
Who?
The falls.
I think
Well,
they
they
No,
have
we
their
have
own-
not.
What do they have,
They
Rainbow Rider
do
or
have,
Family Rider?
they do have their public transit.
Order, this question is not relevant to the motion. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know that that's gonna matter a
Well,
ton for the
we
rate
get
discussion.
tons of calls to go down there because they don't have the services that a lot of people are looking for. I mean, it just hypothetically, if you went down there and said, hey, listen,
I think that's something we could explore, but that's probably not pertinent to the rate discussion at the current time.
Oh, 150.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to touch back on what Doug had brought up. We call that Brainerd outside city limits, and that fare cost is currently $2.25. Inside city limits is $1.25, and then same day is double each of those fares.
So where would your 275 come in place?
It was
Anything
not
inside of
$3
Brainerd.
and it was not 2.5, so it was between the two. I would be amenable to 2.5 to start with, if that would make others more comfortable. But I don't think we can continue to put this off. Who's supposed to pay for it? Who's supposed to pay for it? We're bleeding red ink. Who are you going to get to pay for it? Somebody has to, and it sure as heck shouldn't be the taxpayers of Brainerd. I don't really feel any joy when I go to the gas station, have to pay $3.27 a gallon either. I don't jump up and down with joy, but I do like to drive my car and be able to go somewhere, so I pay it. And I think that the bus service has to somewhat mirror that. It's a way of getting around, of getting to places you want to go and need to go, and you have to expect to pay for it. That's just common sense.
Go ahead.
Question to the motion.
Jessica?
I think your motion indicated, take effect April 15th, is that correct?
That was part of it, yes, you're
I'm
correct.
amenable to changes.
I'm not, I don't know if we can do that with the public notice I think we have to give and approval by the council. I just, this would be a recommendation to the council to do that. So I'm just throwing that out there, so whatever date that we could, perhaps I think you're looking at as soon as
May
possible
1st, or-
based on all the, maybe I'm trying to put words in your motion, but
Well, what do you think, May 1st is?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's it.
You know, I'm just putting something out to get something going.
Miss,
Chair, if I may,
Go ahead, Jeff.
the amount of, you said 275?
Yes, correct.
There's a lot of fare structures right now, and if we go, if the city of Brainerd would go from a current, and I just want to throw this out there, I've been riding this bus since 1993, and the fare has always been $1 until we raised it to $1.25. I don't think we ever did a 3-month later increase, Jan, just not that that matters, but.
I think we did.
Okay, anyway, if at $1.25 today, you call, same day, it's $2.50. If you go to Baxter today and you call in advance, is that correct, Crystal? It's $2.50 if you call the same day, right? If you go to Baxter today, you call in advance, it's $2.25.
That's correct.
So you don't, it isn't double, but it adds $1 to go to Baxter. And if we carried that same structure at a 275 rate, you call in advance, you'd have a 375 ride to Baxter, there, and 375 back. Again, I'm not arguing your amount. I just want to make sure we all understand that when we have all these different fare structures, it gets a little difficult. That's why what I suggested is that we go to the same rate Baxter charges. It would make it so much easier. You call in advance for a ride tomorrow, it would cost you $2.25 as opposed to $1.25. And of course, the numbers are, you're getting 50 cents less per ride. And again, if you call it the same day, then you would pay, it would be $2.25 would be $4.50 to go to Baxter the same day. And then again, if you went, how would we do that? Would we add $1 if we went to Baxter in advance?
So does he think it should be 250?
that's up to the TAC. I mean, that's something we could do.
I mean, to throw a number out,
I'm
like
okay.
Yeah.
275 a ride, I'm not
Mr. Chair,
really against
Hold
that.
on one second, let's let Jeff finish.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to, you got people that are used to, I mean, people that ride, they pay this much. And then you got drivers that have to understand, and dispatchers that have to understand how this rate change affects. So what's the proper amount to raise it that isn't gonna turn people away? Okay, we don't wanna lose riders, I understand, I think people are actually gonna be willing to pay more money, cause everything's going up. accept the ride on the bus. And so I understand that. Do we want to make this more difficult for the people operating the bus service and the people riding it by having I'll call it an obscure amount, 275. And it's not that I'm against it in the sense of raising it, but what's the best way to raise our rate, collect more revenue? Is 275 going to make that much difference over 2.25 that we're going to see this get out of the red, like you're talking about? I don't necessarily think so, but I just throwing that out there to think about, because until you're involved in how you address all these different rates, it's easy to just throw numbers out for fare increases.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jen.
the motioner was amenable to change that rate. You know, she wasn't stuck on 275. So, and as a seconder, I would also be amenable to change that rate. I agree, and it'll be up to Mary, but I agree if we bring it our regular rate up to what Baxter is now, which is 225, correct?
I thought it was 250.
225, isn't it? It's 225. Okay, it's
225.
225, with the same day being whatever it is, if it's 375, to whatever.
450.
450, thank you. I believe it's going to be it's not going to be enough to correct our whole budget, but it'll be enough to help us go through, and when we get our fine analysis, to be able to be more of adjustment. So that's what I would ask the motioner to consider.
Well, I'm amenable to just about anything to get an increase. It isn't enough, and I think at some point we're going to have to take the scales off of our eyes and bite the bullet on this. This is not going to get better. And so I certainly will, if you'll allow it, Mr. Chair, I will revise my motion for the 225 to go from where we are to 225. When would it be feasible to put it in place? We should do it as quickly as we can. I don't know how long that takes, but anyway, 225, Jan.
Okay, I agree to the amendment. I would like to put the date in, if it's okay with the motioner, to have this looked at May 1st, to start being in effect at May
I
1st.
sure hope so. It's 2 months, you know.
Mr. Chair,
give us 30
that's,
days.
I just wanted to clarify on the timing. I think that's kind of where I felt that in this financial projection, I put May through December, because I felt like May 1st would be doable. We can get this to the council. As long as there's support through the council and they approve any increases that way pretty quickly without tabling it further on, we should be able to get the notice in the paper and do those appropriate pieces and get it into effect for May 1st. I think April 15th was going to be a little bit more challenging.
Okay, just to clarify the order by Cap, to raise the fares to match Baxter's or dollar increase of $1.20 or $2.25 per ride. Same day would go up to $4.50, and that would be hopefully going May 1st forward.
Mr. Chair, can I also clarify, so that's inside city limits, did the TAC want to look at increasing Brainerd outside city limits an additional $1 in similar?
Can we do that?
Can you clarify real quick what outside Brainerd is again for rate right now?
2.25
It is 2.25.
currently.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say that right
Next
now,
week, Baxter will raise their rates.
right now, a call for the next day ride is $125. Going to Baxter, it costs $1 more. So if we just stick with that, that would make that ride $3.25 from Brainerd to Baxter. If you in an advance call. So I just want to, that's correct, I believe. That would make it $3.70, $3.25.
That's correct.
So that plays a role in people traveling on the bus as well, so. That would make it a $6.50 ride if you call for the same day. No, or is it double to $4.50?
I think it would
I'm confused.
potentially, right now it doubles to $4.50, I believe.
Okay, so we including outside of Brainerd city limits dollar increase as well on this?
I didn't think we go outside the city
But
limits.
I didn't think we did that. I thought that Baxter took care of that. It was going to Baxter.
Crystal or Jesse, do you want to clarify?
When we go to Baxter, we pay an extra,
If we go outside the city limits, isn't that Crow Wing County?
when we go to Baxter,
Or Baxter?
we pay an extra dollar.
If they go from like here to Walmart, they gotta pay
Okay.
an extra dollar.
Okay.
They don't get the Baxters
They
within
pay
the
the
Baxter.
Baxter.
It's with, I'm sorry, yes, so
So-
I think, yeah, we could do that. Is that okay with you?
Mis-
Yes, yes.
It's okay with you?
Mr.
Not
Mr.
anywhere near enough, but
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm not against the 2.25. I just, the majority of the ridership is low income and elderly. And I just worry about too big a jump at one time that it'll affect their finances. So, I'm not against the 2.25. I know we gotta do something.
we have to do it.
So I'm worried about losing ridership.
Right.
So I just wanted to put that out.
As am I.
Mr. Chair, can I clarify one more piece, please?
Yes.
So we talked about 3.25 for outside city limits. Is the TAC recommending an increase on the same day from $4.50 to $5.50 a dollar, or the same structure for same day as double? So it would be $6.50 for the same day for outside city limits. So if you're proposing 3.25,
Policy should stay
For
in
me,
place.
if we're looking at,
Yeah.
I don't like doubling the fare for same day to go on to Baxter, I guess, to some extent.
Mr. Chair,
It's just me.
maybe I can get it straight in my brain. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Mary, but what my understanding is, I'd like to increase it, the Brainerd regular fare equal to what we have in the Baxter, okay? Okay. So, and now the same day, what our policy has to increase it by $1 for same day?
Same day is double, so
It's double.
your normal fare in Brainerd would go from $2.25 to $4.50 if
Okay.
it was same day ride.
Okay, all right. Now, if you're going outside of the city limits, it's an extra $1, correct?
that's what's been proposed
Presently?
is going to, presently it's $1, and then that was the proposal was going an extra $1. So it would be 3.25 if you call in advance.
To
So
go
our current-
outside the city of Brainerd.
go outside the
Walmart.
city.
Let's say go to Walmart, it'd be 3.25.
So our current practice is essentially the same day is double the rate. So that's why I want to clarify, for the same day, do you want to double the proposed rate of 3.25, or do you just want to increase the same day $1 similarly to the advanced rate?
I guess.
So the difference would be either $5.50 or $6.50.
I would like to do the one where it doesn't double.
$5.50.
I'd leave all the policies in.
Oh, yeah, whatever our policies, yeah, I mean, whatever the
Leave
policy.
policies alone, just change the money.
Our policy is same day is double the fare rate. So
Okay,
it would go from the proposed 3.25 to $6.50 if it was a same day call.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think this is just the first step. I think we're going to be back here soon, finessing and doing other things, but I think we've got to do something and do it now. You know, I empathize with you on the low income, but there's a lot of low income and people in Brainerd paying real estate taxes. And they can't afford to have to subsidize a bus that should not have to be subsidized by the taxpayers.
Yep, hold on one second, Jeff, I'm just gonna jump in real quick. I think, personally, I don't really like increasing the fare at all to go to Baxter, just because I think half of the resources in our communities are over there, and people are going back and forth. I don't even know where the line is half the time, because I'm looking up addresses, and one time it's Baxter, and block down the street it's Brainerd. So I don't really like including Baxter as considered outside Brainerd city limits for purposes of riding the bus anyway, but that's a separate issue and a policy thing, and that's not what we have on the table here. And we might need to review that at a different meeting, but that's where I stand on that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so if we increase the fare to 2.25 for an advanced hauler, that's $1 increase. if we call in advance and we wanna go to Baxter, that would make it a $3.25 fare, okay? Right now, it costs $2.25, so that's a $1 increase. And, if, the $1.25 is inside Brainerd, you get $2.25 to go outside of Brainerd to Baxter. So what we're proposing, and what I understand you were agreeable to, is leaving the policy the way it is. So if you call in the same day to go to Baxter, you take a $3.25 fare and double that to $6.50. I'm in favor of increasing rates, but not to that extent for people. There's a lot of people who travel from Brainerd to Baxter. And if they're gonna, you know, and again, I understand that, you know, things gotta increase, but I would be more in favor of changing our policy to reflect a more equitable, if you will, fare that says, okay, $2.25 inside Brainerd, $3.25 to go to Baxter, and just, same day calls, you either increase it $1 or we don't increase it at all, because it's already increasing substantially. So I'm against keeping the policy the same way once we increase that $1. Only because of that same day fare, which we do get a lot more revenue, and we try to deter people from that. I'm not willing to deter them at the cost of $6.50 a ride. That's where I'm at that.
I would agree, Jeff. I think we need to revisit that policy at our next meeting, especially if we're gonna keep looking at increasing fares. If you're gonna keep increasing fares, I don't know if it works to double the fare every time we have same-day call, because I don't know that jumping from $5 for same day to $10 really is feasible for anyone. And I think we're gonna lose riders, frankly. I called today just to see what a taxi costs to Walmart from Brainerd, and it's $13. So, I mean, we start doubling the fare, and as soon as we start edging on that, I mean, and that's taxi. I mean, I'm sure people can talk to their friends and say, I'll give you $5 for gas as opposed to ride the bus. So I think that's a slippery slope. I actually would like to not do the increase for outside of Brainerd and just let Baxter Brainerd be the same for right now and review that policy at a later time, but
Can we just waive our policy for this until the analysis comes out? And just,
I do not know that one.
So would you say, kind of go through, what would you like to see us do today?
Well, we can take a vote on your motion, but so far we just have your motion without a second
Well,
after
my
the revision.
major
On the
concern-
revision you
I
did?
I
Okay.
did.
I
So-
missed that, sorry.
So let's use numbers right now. And this is what I would like to see, would be increase our regular to 225.
Correct.
Correct, okay. Baxter
It's already at 225.
is already at 225, but we normally have it $1 more, right?
Currently, as it stands, it's,
going from here to there.
That is correct.
Okay,
currently, right now, though, if I were to call and go from here to Walmart, it's gonna cost me $225.
Correct.
so it's $1 more.
If you call in
So
advance.
it's not, is it really a $1 increase, or am I just paying the Baxter rate?
You're
Because
essentially
if I'm just
paying the
paying
Same
the
thing.
Baxter rate,
Oh, so-
then
oh.
I don't know
is-
that we need to increase the $1 for outside Brainerd. We can just increase Brainerd, and Baxter will still be what it is, and
No.
it'll still be the same rate.
No wonder I was confused, because that makes sense. So that's, so the same day, we're talking about the same, we get that same day,
Be $450,
be 450.
correct.
And,
That's the current motion on the table.
okay,
Can I make sure, staff, so you all, if this passes, you see the rates just go up $1. Your same day would be, what would it be, $6.50?
They would mirror the Baxter rate of 2 1/4 and 450, and no changes to the Brainerd outside the city limits rate at this time.
For now until the
I
analysis.
think until we get the nails. So there's a first and a second on the table for 225 and 450 same day, with the proposal of it being started May 1st. I think we clarified your other questions, Jesse, in there.
And then-
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So the other part I'd like to add in here as we continue through the next couple months of further analysis, I only represented one change in this year, as we do this analysis, we can factor in the motion of this current increase that we're proposing here in that next analysis. And then also if it shows that we need to do another one, we can propose another one. I'll call it mid 2023 as well, maybe like in September or something like that. If we feel like we need to still phase more increases to cover the difference. So we can put that into the projection, but again, that would have to be part of the analysis work. But that is something that we can look at. Is this does not have to be the only one of the year.
So we've had a first, a second, lots of discussion.
One more, just so I'm
Go
clear.
ahead, Jeff.
There is no extra dollar if we go to Baxter. It's 225.
Correct. It
That
stays the
isn't part
same.
of the motion.
We didn't make, that wasn't part of the motion.
No.
No. So it stays the same at this point.
Do we want to amend the motion then?
We don't want to add it.
Yeah, we don't want to edit, and it wasn't originally in the motion. So the motion as it stands is to increase Brainerd fares to 225 call ahead. Same day would jump to 450. Going to Baxter would remain the same at 225 and 450 same day.
Yep.
I have a first and a second, lots of discussion. I think we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I do think this is just the first step. We had a lot of discussion, and I think there's even some confusion about some of the Brainerd-Baxter interaction. And that would be a good thing, I guess, for another meeting, maybe. But when was the last time Baxter increased their fares? Do you know that?
If I remember off the top of my head, they increased shortly before we added our quarter, I think, and it was because of their deficit. I can't tell you the year on that.
And does Brainerd
COVID, how's
set
that?
the rate that Baxter has to pay Brainerd to be part of our system?
If I remember right at that time, Mary, I think Andy had conversations with Baxter about this is what your system is costing and what we need to do
Right.
to bring it in line. And so, yes, I think they raised some of their input as well as the fares.
So in effect, Brainerd holds the major contract and we subcontract with Baxter and Crow Wing County. Is that correct?
Through an agreement, correct.
Is it appropriate to look at that contract to see if that's still reasonable, or we should be looking at an increase in that?
That's what that full analysis would do, is we would look at, based on the current percentages and
I
how
think
those
this is a
expenditures are
big
split
picture
out.
that we have to look at the whole thing.
I think
I
part of
would
the
agree.
analysis
Yeah.
is they'll see what Baxter needs to increase or how much more. And Pequot or the county,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's
So-
not all on Brainerd.
To clarify as well, the intention for staff, and I think we presented this in the January meeting as well, is once we do this initial analysis and say, here's where we're projecting that you would need to be in fares to balance the checkbook in a sense, and get input from those boards and councils and administrators, Crow Wing, Baxter, Pine River, and get their feelings on that of what those steps would be. If that means they have to increase fares to this, or you have to increase your fares to here and levy, or just levy, or reduce service, and give them the options and see what those boards would like to see done with their portion of the service. And then with that, let's say that they want to do a combination of both. We would rerun that analysis with those proposed changes. So let's say Pine River did not want to have a service anymore. We would have to rerun that analysis again, removing Pine River's 7% of the expenditures and finding a way to split that appropriately. Because that'd be something else, is because just because Pine River's gone, that 7% of the expenditures has to go somewhere. Who picks that up and what's appropriate? But again, they have a lot of expenditures going all the way up to Pine River, so it actually might benefit the system too, but we can't say that for sure one way or the other without doing that full analysis with the whole group.
I'd like to just briefly respond to something, if I may, Mr. Chair, that Jeff brought up about Pine River paying their way. When we entered into the contract with Pine River, I recall very specifically that Andy did tell us that the cost of bringing the bus to Pine River and was also their expense. So I think it should be built in that they are actually paying everything, but sometimes things get lost, so I don't know.
Agree too.
But I remember that discussion.
I remember some of that discussion
Yeah, I do
as
too.
well. Just two things to try to have on our agenda for next time, I think, is that policy on the double fare for the same day. I think we should just revisit that and at least look at the language. I don't know that that means we'll change it at the meeting, but I think we should at least review it specifically. And then the other thing, I know I had emailed Jesse a little bit about just systems for paying fares and if tokens are the best way to continue to do that, especially if we keep increasing fares. I don't know if it's reasonable for people to have 10, 12 tokens on them at all times. Yes, they can use cash, and that is an option, but maybe using a card might also be something to explore. So just if we can explore that for next time and maybe get some costs on what that would look like, I think would be helpful as well. Unfinished business, then I think we have concluded. And public forum, do we have anyone on?
Nope.
It's like a no. Any other committee member comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I'd like to thank Jesse and Crystal for doing this. I appreciate it. I know we kind of pushed you forward on that, but I do appreciate your time. So thank you. I just want to say thank you.
As do I, thank you. Anything else from the committee?
Mr. Chair, are we going to set up for our next meeting?
Oh, yeah, I suppose we should.
Maybe we ought to meet every month for a while. We got a lot of stuff we ought to be addressing.
I don't know that we're gonna have anything data-wise in a month, because I think, what were we talking before? 2 months. April's,
I believe April was where I was kind of targeting, be able to get the full analysis and then have time to talk with those boards. I guess it'd be up to the TAC if you wanted to address some of the other pieces that you just mentioned in a special meeting, but I'd leave that up to the TAC if you wanted to have another meeting for those.
I guess if we wanna meet in a month to look at that policy and review systems for fares, that is an option. Otherwise, we can wait and have an extra long meeting in April, I guess. That's up to everyone.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest we go to April. And then have a really light agenda, because it would be nice to go through our policy and through our analysis.
Light agenda, you got that?
Yeah, I know.
In other words, you mean spend most of our time on policy.
That's right, that's right.
I know you had
So
one
that's
other
not a
thing.
light agenda, it's just not many subjects, but I think you're right.
I'm not so sure it would necessary to meet in April just to go over policy, we do the same thing when we meet. I mean, we're looking at, well, April would be the third Thursday, so it's about 7 weeks, roughly, 6, 7 weeks. I guess that's up to the committee, but, I did wanna say that, staff did try to push back on us for having just an analysis of Brainerd, which I know John recognized, but, it's very difficult when you have the other entities who, when we want to raise our rates, and I think we all agree it has to be done, so I don't think any of us are arguing about that. And what's the right number, that's the question, that's up for debate and perhaps analysis, but if we don't know what the other entities are gonna do, and so it's hard for staff to come back with answers to our questions in the sense that, well, how much is this gonna cost Brainerd? Because we have to look at this as an entire operation, only we need the input from the other entities involved, even, and of course, Pine River, Mary, you're absolutely right, that's what Andy had said, it's an exclusive contract, they will pay their way, and that's why we need to nail that down, and I don't know if it's beneficial, if they're contributing to our capital costs, it's only at 7%, that's pretty negligible, I don't know if that would make a big difference, but if we're spending more on that service, then obviously, if they're not contributing based on the cost of that service, we need to have a serious talk with Pine River and say, listen, I don't know what arrangements we had or what's actually in writing, but we need to nail that down and find out, are we just throwing money away if they only have a couple riders a day and I think it's 3 days a week they operate up there, so.
We probably are.
I mean,
They probably
it's
are.
great if they want it, they gotta pay for it though, that's, so.
I would agree. And so, Jesse, are you thinking that analysis won't be by third week of April, or
I'm hopeful we'll be able to get it done.
then I think we target the third week of April. What is that? 20th?
Of April?
That's
That
a
would be
third
April
Thursday.
20th, Mr. Chair.
What was that, Crystal?
That would be April 20th, yes.
Does that work for committee members?
It's Thursday?
Yep.
Wife's on vacation that week, but
It'll work. Okay. Crystal and Jesse, that works for you as well?
Jeff, that was a funny.
That date works for me.
That works, okay. Okay, we'll schedule for April 20th, 2023 then. And if there's nothing further,
Move to adjourn?
second for that? Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned at 4:37, or 4 o'clock and 37 seconds.
Right on time.
What I meant.